Hi everyone, this is Arkady Frekhtman. I'm a New York City personal injury trial attorney, and today I wanted to talk about the idea of responsibility and how this frame plays a part in winning your personal injury case. And it goes to a fundamental difference between the plaintiff, who represents the injury victim, right? The plaintiff's attorney and the plaintiff's side, versus the defense. And they want to, lower the amount, pay nothing, or pay you as little as possible. So there was actually a defense attorney who wrote a book, and the book, I believe, was called Nuclear Verdicts. And it was like a response to a lot of plaintiff attorneys getting large verdicts for serious injury victims, whether it's spinal surgeries or traumatic brain injuries. There were some verdicts that were like 10 million or more. And so he wrote a response to that, and he said, these are like nuclear verdicts, this shouldn't be happening. And then he gave his outline for how to prevent it at trial. And a lot of the plaintiff attorneys read the book, and then they made a response to the book. And one of the interesting things in the book was that this attorney actually says, in order to prevent $1 million verdicts, like 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, what you want to do as a defense attorney is you want to take some responsibility for something. Now he says, don't take responsibility for the negligence, right? Don't take liability unless you have to, and don't, take full responsibility basically, but you want to take some responsibility because it's going to help you win. So I thought that was an interesting point, and I think you have to really draw the distinction between full responsibility versus, feigning responsibility, because when you minimize your responsibility, that could be shameful, dishonorable, and also irresponsible. And you have to really introduce that concept of what is full responsibility and what is real repentance, right? As opposed to fake responsibility. So I think that, it's important. You could kind of illustrate it with this idea of, let's say a boy's playing baseball in the backyard and he throws a ball or he hits a ball with a bat and it shatters the neighbor's window. And really, full responsibility is three things. Number one, the parent should take the boy over there to the neighbor, and he should say, number one, I'm sorry I did it. So admit that you did it and say that you're sorry. And number two, you have to offer to pay for it, right? Or somehow compensate the neighbor for it. But if you just say, like, I'm sorry, and you run away, well, that's not really taking responsibility. And if you just say, it wasn't even me, well, that's obviously not taking responsibility, right? So then you could kind of use that concept with what the defense is doing, because if they hurt someone and gave someone a lifelong traumatic brain injury, they're going to accept some responsibility. They're going to say, okay, we were at fault because you were stopped at a red light and we rear-ended you, so we take full responsibility for the crash. They could say that and give, that mouthpiece, but is it really true? Do they really do that? As a good plaintiff's attorney, you could kind of flip that around and call that fake responsibility, right? And that's just really hypocrisy, and that's really irresponsibility, and that could be dishonorable and shameful. Because essentially, what they do a lot of the time is they'll take even liability because they have to, right? Like if you're stopped at a red light and they hit you in the rear, well, there's no way they're going to win liability. So they take liability, but the reason they take liability is because then they want to say, well, now you can't talk about how the crash happened, right? If we had a drunk driver, let's say, you can't talk about it. That's what they try to do. So actually they take responsibility in order to help their legal case, that's not right. And also sometimes the lawyer will get up an opening statement, the defense lawyer, and he'll say, we take full responsibility, but then you never hear about it again from any witness throughout the entire trial. And remember, what the lawyers say is not evidence. It's just a preview of what they think the evidence will show. So you have to call them out on it. If they just say that, but then there's no actual evidence, you have to call them out on it, because the verdict has to be based on the actual clinical evidence. and those are just then empty words, and it becomes a type of manipulation. So I think one of the ways you can get ahead of this issue as a plaintiff's attorney representing an injury victim is just ask the jurors in voir dire. So when you start the jury selection, ask them, how do you feel about people who minimize their responsibility? And see what they talk about, right? People will start talking, and it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be a defendant, right? It could be like one of their boyfriends didn't take responsibility for something, or it could be like a friend or a worker, something at work. And ask them, what does accepting responsibility mean to you? And have the jurors tell you. And then if you hear something that is like the principle in your case, then you can take that, but it's much more powerful than a lawyer kind of like shoving it down someone's throat saying, hey, I'm a lawyer, this is what responsibility is. No, they don't have to listen to you, right? But if it comes from the other jurors, that's much more powerful because now they've given you the principle, and then you kind of use that to win the case. So I think that's an important question to ask, is what does accepting responsibility mean to you, and have the jury talk about it. But yeah, that's essentially this idea of real repentance, taking full responsibility, means admitting it, saying, I did it, I'm sorry, and let me make it right, let me pay for it. Whereas if the defense was really doing that, then you wouldn't have to be here, right? Why would you need to go through a whole lawsuit if they were willing to say that, right? But they're not. So that's why you have to couch that as hypocrisy, and that would be the way to respond to that argument. So I hope this was helpful. Let us know what questions you have. We are here for you. Our goal is helping serious injury victims and families. All the best.